You left the window open. Rachel's voice cracked through the monitor like a whip again. Upstairs, the hallway was dim, lit only by the blinking red light of the baby monitor. The air was unnaturally still, too still for late June, in Oregon, when the nights usually held the soft hum of wind or distant tree frogs. But tonight, something felt wrong. Even the trees beyond the nursery window had fallen silent, as if listening. Downstairs, Mark froze mid-step in the kitchen. The glass of water trembled slightly in his hand. He hadn't opened the window. Not tonight. Rachel's bare feet moved fast against the hardwood as she crossed the threshold into the nursery. The baby, Ella, was still asleep, barely 6 months old, her tiny chest rising and falling in the blue glow of the nightlight shaped like a crescent moon. But there was something else in the room too. A shadow, no dash movement, the family dog. Jasper was sitting rigid by the crib, an older Labrador mix, with fading gray around the eyes and a permanent limp in his right hind leg. He wasn't usually this still, or this alert. His ears were up, nose high, and his body stiff as if locked onto something unseen. Rachel's breath caught. "Jasper," she whispered. He didn't move. His eyes were fixed not on her but on the open window. Mark reached the top of the stairs just as Rachel crossed the room. The monitor in her hand buzzed faintly, showing the split-screen footage from earlier that day. But now, the camera feed was no longer background noise. Now it was Levand. Jasper was the center of it. Mark watched from the doorway. Jasper had shifted closer to the crib, not sniffing, not pacing, just watching. "Something's wrong," Rachel said, her voice low now, not panicked, just chilled. She moved slowly to the window, pushing it shut with a click. A low growl rumbled from Jasper's throat. Not aggressive, protective. Rachel turned to him. "What is it, boy?" And that's when the wind slammed into the glass. Not a breeze, not a gust, but a hit as if something outside had thrown itself at the pane. The glass didn't shatter, but it sang, vibrating in place, and for a moment the entire nursery felt like it had shifted slightly off balance. Jasper barked one sharp, loud, unlike anything he'd done before. Then, without hesitation, he rose to his paws, leaned his front legs over the edge of the crib, and dragged the baby blanket toward the floor. "Jasper." "No." Rachel moved, heart racing, but then she saw. Ella wasn't crying. She wasn't even fussing. She was awake, eyes wide, watching Jasper. And Jasper, teeth careful around the fabric of her onesie, had pulled her gently halfway out of the crib, just as the baby monitor's red light began to flicker. And then the fire alarm screamed. But it wasn't fire, it was carbon monoxide. Sharp digital tone shrieked down the hallway. Mark spun toward the stairwell. "The heater, it's leaking, get her out now." Rachel's hands moved without thought. She swept Ella into her arms just as Jasper let go of the fabric and nudged her toward the door with a firm nose. The moment they stepped into the hallway, they could feel it. The heaviness, the wrongness, the smell of nothing, no smoke, no burning, just a still, invisible weight pressing into their lungs. Mark grabbed the emergency bag by the front door. Rachel held Ella tight against her shoulder. Jasper, now wheezing faintly, followed with a strained limp but never once looked back. By the time the fire department arrived 15 minutes later, the carbon monoxide levels inside the house were well beyond what could have been survivable. For a baby sleeping in a closed room, the heater's malfunction had triggered a slow leak that had gone unnoticed until the room was already filling with the poison. The officer reviewing the footage the next morning didn't speak for a long time. He watched it 3 times, silent, eyes narrow, mouth set in a firm line. "Ma'am," he said, sliding the tablet across the kitchen counter, "your dog was watching that window all night, right until the monitor blinked red." Rachel nodded, trembling hands wrapped around her coffee mug. "Do you think he sensed something?" The officer didn't answer right away, but when he spoke, it was quiet, careful. "Whatever he knew, he acted faster than most people ever would. You should know that dog saved your daughter's life." Jasper sat by the back door, gaze turned to the yard, tail thumping softly on the tile. A guardian, witness, and, somehow, something more. But what none of them saw, what wasn't on the footage, was what happened 1 minute after the family had fled the house. The nursery camera, still recording, flickered once, then again, and just before the feed died completely, the window creaked open by itself. The next morning didn't feel like morning at all. The house sat under a strange hush, as though time hadn't quite restarted. Even the sunlight that filtered through the kitchen blinds looked dull, muted, as if unwilling to touch the floors that had nearly been fatal the night before. Rachel moved like someone still trapped in a dream, her motions mechanical, every clink of the coffee spoon against the mug too sharp, too loud. Jasper lay by the back door, his breathing slow, heavy. He hadn't touched his food, not even when Mark had tried offering it by hand. The old dog simply rested his head on his paws and stared at the nursery door, ears twitching occasionally, as if still listening for something no one else could hear. Rachel stood at the edge of the living room, arms crossed tightly around her own body. "Do you think it's possible?" she began, then stopped herself. The question felt ridiculous. It sounded like something someone on a ghost hunting show would ask. Mark looked up from the tablet that he knew. He said quietly, finishing the thought for her. I don't know, but I can't stop thinking about how fast he moved. He didn't wait. He didn't bark for help. He acted. He's never done that before, Rachel whispered. He's never even been that close to a crib without whining or pacing. But last night he just sat there like he was waiting. They both turned their gaze toward the tablet. The footage from the security camera was paused at the moment. Jasper had placed himself between the crib and the window. His posture was rigid, almost unnatural. His ears weren't back in fear. They were forward-focused, guarding. Mark slowly pressed play again. What they hadn't noticed before because they had been so focused on Jasper and Ella was what the camera had picked up in the reflection of the nursery window. It wasn't sharp, it wasn't clear, but it was something, a flicker, a shape that moved too tall for an animal, too jerky for wind. It passed just beyond the glass, pausing for a breathless second, and then vanished. Mark rewound, played it again, froze it. The shape had no face, just an outline, like something had passed by the window and left behind only a suggestion. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. That's not smoke. That's not wind. That's someone. No one else saw anyone outside. The fire chief said the CO leak was mechanical, just a bad pipe. But this. Mark couldn't finish the sentence. Jasper shifted slightly from his place near the door, tail flicking once against the floor. Then with effort he stood, not quickly, his limp more pronounced than usual, but with a sense of purpose. He padded slowly down the hallway toward the nursery again. Rachel followed, heart pounding. The air inside the nursery had cleared. The window remained shut. Ella's crib had been moved closer to the opposite wall, and a second monitor now sat perched on the bookshelf on extra precaution. The mobile above her crib turned gently, though no air stirred. Jasper didn't look at the baby. He moved to the exact same spot he'd occupied the night before. He sat back straight, eyes locked on the window again. Silent, waiting. Rachel knelt beside him, resting her hand on his fur. He didn't flinch, but his breathing had deepened, and then something clicked. Mark, she called. Pull up the older footage. He joined her in the room, tablet in hand. What date? The 15th. Remember? That was the night Ella wouldn't stop crying, even though nothing was wrong. We thought it was just teething. Mark scrolled, found the clip, and began playback. And there he was again, Jasper, sitting in the exact same position. Same posture, same alertness. But back then, they hadn't noticed because nothing had happened, or so they thought. This time, the window didn't open, but the reflection that appeared again and again, each time at night, each time when no one else was looking. Many times has he seen it, Rachel whispered. How long has he been watching something we couldn't see? Mark didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night they didn't sleep. Ella was moved into their bedroom, a small crib wedged between. The window was locked, sealed, and blocked with a heavy dresser. The monitors were running. The air was checked twice, but Jasper refused to stay in the room. At exactly 2:12 a.m., he returned to the nursery and sat once again beneath the window. This time, the camera feed caught it clearly. Outside, just beyond the glass, a shape moved past. No footsteps, no sound, just a passing silhouette, too slow for a person, too fluid for an animal. Its form was like vapor, but its direction was deliberate. It paused. Jasper stood, and for the first time in his life, the old dog bared his teeth. The house still smelled of vinegar and industrial fans. They hadn't stayed the night since the carbon monoxide scare, not even after the fire department cleared it. Rachel couldn't bring herself to the idea of putting Ella back in that crib where the air had turned toxic. Just inches from her face made her stomach twist into knots. They'd booked a nearby rental and returned only in short visits, to feed Jasper, collect baby bottles, check the mail. But now, Rachel was back inside the nursery, staring at the window. She'd convinced herself it was a draft, a latch left, unhooked. Maybe the frame had warped in the summer heat, maybe pressure had forced it open. But no one could explain how it had unlatched after she'd already locked it shut, or why the nursery door had been half open when they returned, when Mark had sworn it was closed before the evacuation. More than that, she couldn't shake the feeling Jasper knew something was still wrong. He hadn't gone near the crib since. That night, he avoided the nursery entirely, and when she carried Ella past the doorway, he would stop cold in the hallway, ears twitching, eyes locked on the shadows behind her. At first, Rachel blamed herself. Lack of sleep, too much caffeine. The trauma of nearly losing a child changes how you see things, she told herself. You start imagining the worst, but the feeling wasn't going away. If anything, it had grown sharper, quieter, but heavier, like the weight in a room right before a thunderstorm. Then came the knock at the door. Mark answered it, thinking it was another neighbor offering to help with repairs. But the man on the step wasn't anyone they knew. He wore a blue windbreaker with the gas company logo, but his ID badge looked outdated, the photo slightly blurred, the name worn nearly to smudge. Just here to double-check the meter, he said quickly. Routine follow-up after the leak. Mark hesitated. They said the house was cleared. We've had 3 teams through already. New protocols, the man replied, without eye contact. You'd be surprised what gets missed. Rachel stepped in behind Mark holding Ella. Jasper patted up beside her, tail low, hackles faintly raised. The man glanced at the dog and paused. "Loyal one," he muttered, almost to himself. Rachel's grip tightened on Ella. "Can I see that badge again?" she asked, voice measured. The man hesitated, but only for a second. Then he smiled, turned, and stepped down from the porch another time. Then Mark didn't follow. Neither did Rachel. They watched from the doorway as he climbed into a utility van parked slightly too far from the curb. Engine idling before they'd even shut the door, no license plate on the front. Rear tag blurred by dirt. Jasper didn't move until the van turned the corner. Then he growled deep and low, not loud, but long, and bolted up the stairs without a glance back. Rachel followed fast. She found him standing in the nursery again for the first time in days. Front paws braced, staring up at the camera mounted above the crib. His tail was still, breath shallow. Rachel's eyes flicked to the monitor. Static, just faint snowdrift static. The screen blinked, then again, and in the middle of the visual fuzz, just for a second, a frame froze. Not Jasper, not Ella. Something else. Something tall, something standing at the window, facing inside. The frame vanished before Rachel could hit pause. Her hands shook. "Mark, can you rewind it?" He tried, but the recording had glitched. Only the sound remained. In that moment of garbled footage, layered over static and white noise, a soft whisper slipped through. She wasn't supposed to be alone. Rachel froze. "Did you hear that?" Mark blinked. It was probably just overlapping feedback. The mic glitches sometimes, but Jasper was trembling now. Not afraid, alert, watching the window again. Night. Rachel couldn't sleep. She brought Ella into their bed, left the monitor off, and curled around her daughter like a shield. Jasper lay curled at the bedroom door, refusing to sleep, eyes fixed on the hallway. At 2:47 a.m., the baby began to cry. Not the usual cry, not hunger or restlessness. A scream, high-pitched, panicked. Rachel shot up. The crib was empty because Ella was with them. But the monitor had flicked on by itself. It was showing the nursery, the crib, untouched, and a shape moving near the wall. Rachel lunged for the device and shut it off, heart hammering. Her mind fought against what she knew she had seen. But Jasper had already left the room. He was gone. They found him back in the nursery, snarling at the empty corner. Mark reached for him, but Jasper didn't budge. Instead, the old dog stepped forward, pressed his nose against the baseboard, and began to dig. The floorboard was loose, and beneath it, wrapped in newspaper yellowed with age, was something unexpected. A baby rattle. Not Ella's older, wooden hand carved, stained with something that hadn't faded over time. Rachel's breath caught as she unfolded the last piece of paper. It was a headline from 1978. "Infant dies in mystery gas leak, family dog perishes trying to reach nursery." Her hand covered her mouth. Mark turned pale. Jasper sat beside them now, quiet. Again, his eyes soft. He hadn't just sensed danger, he'd remembered it. Rachel hadn't slept. Not really, even after the house was cleared. Even after the fire crew packed up their gear and confirmed what the meters showed, dangerously high carbon monoxide, traced to a cracked seal in the basement heater. She hadn't closed her eyes, not with the image playing over and over in her head. Jasper at the crib, frozen like a statue, then dragging Ella free with such eerie timing it bordered on something unexplainable. The footage had gone viral overnight. Someone from the fire crew had shared a copy with the department. From there it had leaked. By morning, strangers were commenting under Rachel's private Facebook posts, calling Jasper a hero, calling the moment a miracle. But that wasn't what was bothering her. It was what came after. The way the nursery camera had glitched, then cut off. The way the window creaked open after they'd left, despite being firmly latched. No wind, no vibration. Just a slow, steady inching, as if something unseen had waited until they were gone. Mark was trying to be rational. He always did. "It's probably the frame warping," he'd said while replacing the batteries in the monitor, pretending he hadn't flinched when the baby's nightlight flickered twice. Old house. Heat changes pressure. But Rachel wasn't buying it. And neither, it seemed, was Jasper. He hadn't left Ella's side since that night. Not once. He no longer curled up on the rug by their bed. He stayed just outside the nursery door, his body facing it, eyes fixed on the hallway, especially the dark stretch near the attic pull down. Sometimes he growled. Other times he simply stared, tail still, chest rising with shallow, watchful breaths. The pediatrician said Ella was fine, no symptoms, no long-term effects, but she had changed in small, almost imperceptible ways. She didn't coo as much. He tracked corners of the ceiling that no one else looked at, her tiny fists, sometimes clenched mid-nap as if reacting to something Rachel and Mark couldn't see. It wasn't just nerves anymore. It was a pattern. On June 25th, the carbon monoxide detector in the hallway went off again. This time the heater was shut down. The house was ventilated. No fumes. No technical cause. Just the shriek of the alarm at 3:08 a.m., followed by the unmistakable sound of Jasper's claws scratching against the nursery door. When Rachel opened it, he burst in, barking frantically, placing himself between Ella and the crib wall. She checked the monitor. The feed was black and white, the infrared flickering oddly around the edges. But for one brief moment, Rachel could swear she saw movement by the window again, a shape that didn't belong. It wasn't human, it wasn't an animal, it was presence, just the outline of something tall, hunched, and shifting, then gone. They left the house that morning. Mark called his brother in Salem and arranged to stay there for a few nights. Rachel packed only what she needed for Ella: bottles, diapers, the baby monitor, the old stuffed rabbit she never slept without, and Jasper, limping, tired, but unwavering, jumped into the back seat without needing to be called. But the story didn't stay behind. That night, in the guest room of Mark's brother's house, Rachel tried to sleep beside Ella's crib. The monitor was on, a fresh feed showing Ella's calm, sleeping face, the little rabbit tucked under her arm. Jasper lay at the foot of the crib again, his body blocking the sliver of moonlight coming in from the curtain's edge. At 2:11 a.m., the monitor flashed white, then it cut to black. Rachel bolted upright. So did Jasper. The house was silent, too silent. She moved to the crib, expecting Ella to stir, but the baby was still, breathing, but frozen, like she had gone from dreaming to sensing something. Just as Jasper stood and pressed his body against her side, one paw reaching up onto the crib rail. And then, impossibly, the sound of wind inside the room. Mark rushed in, face pale. The thermostat just dropped 10 degrees in the hallway. "Did you open a window?" "No." The monitor flickered back on, and there it was again in the reflection of the window glass. A figure. Closer this time. Leaning its head almost level with the crib. Jasper growled so low that Rachel felt it through the floorboards. Then the twist they hadn't seen coming, the reflection in the window. It wasn't new. Rachel froze. Her hand shot to the stuffed rabbit in the crib. She turned it over, stared at the small tag stitched beneath its ear. A name: Bethany, not Ella's toy. It wasn't even theirs. Rachel stared at the crib in stunned silence. This wasn't their first house, not even their second, but it was the first one they'd bought without researching who lived there before. She checked the monitor history again, the footage from that night, slowed it down frame by frame. There, in the background of the nursery, just before Jasper lunged to pull Ella away, was a second crib, a faint outline only visible in the monitor's infrared. And lying inside it, something small, something still, a baby, but not hers, not alive. This wasn't just a gas leak, or an open window, or a glitch. Something had been here before them, and Jasper somehow had known. Rachel stood in the nursery doorway, the dawn light barely warming the walls. It had been 3 days since the last incident. 3 nights of waiting, watching, hoping the quiet meant peace, and not something holding its breath. Jasper hadn't left the baby's side, not even to eat. His weight had thinned slightly, but his focus never wavered. Wherever Ella was, he was there too, not guarding, but sharing something. Like he understood the weight of a secret too, heavy for words. Mark tried once more to dismiss it all, the glitches, the cold, the rabbit with another child's name. He even suggested tossing the monitor. "It's messing with your head," he said gently. But Rachel knew better now. This wasn't technology playing tricks. It was memory residue, a presence tied to something unfinished. And Jasper, somehow, had been its witness long before they were. Later that afternoon, Rachel sat cross-legged on the nursery floor, Ella gurgling beside her on a blanket. The stuffed rabbit, Bethany's, lay near the crib, untouched. Jasper lay between it and the baby, as always, like a barrier no one else could see. Rachel reached forward and held the toy gently in her hands. Something about its weight felt different now. She turned it again, stared at the faded stitching. Then quietly she began to hum a lullaby she didn't remember learning, but one that had come to her in a dream 2 nights ago. Soft, lilting, old. Ella stilled as Rachel sang. Even Jasper's breathing slowed. For a long moment the room felt like it had never known fear. Just warmth, and dust, and old wood floors that had heard 100 lullabies long before this one. Then the monitor clicked on. No static, no flickering, just a smooth, clear feed. Ella asleep now. Jasper still beside her, and in the reflection of the window a faint glow like candlelight moving slowly away from the crib. It didn't frighten Rachel this time. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt like goodbye. She rose, crossed to the window and opened it gently. The air that drifted in was warm, scented with lilacs from the bush near the fence. No shadow moved, no chill clung to her skin, just light, and the slow breath of a home exhaling. That night, Jasper finally slept, curled at the foot of the bed, body loose, breathing deep. When Mark kissed Ella's forehead and whispered, "She's safe now," there was no trace of doubt in his voice. Weeks passed, no more glitches, no alarms. The house began to feel like theirs, not borrowed, not haunted, just lived in. Rachel planted flowers beneath the nursery window, and one day while digging along the foundation she found a tiny toy rattle, weathered, cracked, but still whole. She buried it gently beneath the lilacs, pressing the soil down like closing a storybook. Jasper never limped again after that. He walked with Ella as she took her first steps, waited by the stairs when she learned to climb, and in the years to come, never left her side. When asked about the scar beneath his ear, Rachel always smiled and said, "That's just where he carries his courage." And if Ella ever looked at the window a little longer than most, or stared into a dark hallway with a strange kind of calm, no one mentioned it. Some things stay with us, not to frighten, but to remind. Because sometimes the quietest guardians wear fur instead of armor, and sometimes what we call a haunting is really just a goodbye that needed to be seen.